We send our very best to Washington, D.C. to represent us every single time. Don't you feel that way? How you doing? My name is Rob Hunter. Mike is off today for Russell and Hunter's The Bromance. But we got tons of things to get to today, including, oh, you're going to love this one. This is politics in America 2024.
We're not.
This is from a House hearing. A House hearing that just goes off the rails.
Look, you guys earlier literally just
you just voted to do it.
Y'all did it first, so you don't want to talk about it.
Voted to do it.
Order.
I'm trying to get clarification.
Look at calm down.
No, because this is what y'all do. So I'm trying to get
Miss
clarification.
Crockett, you're not recognized. Miss Crockett.
I can't hear you with your yelling.
You don't want
calm
me to
down.
Be,
Can you please calm down?
Don't tell me to calm down.
Calm down.
Because y'all talk noise, and then
You're out of control.
Because if I
Look, Chairman,
if I
can
come
we
and
send
talk
outside to
shit
take a
about
break
her,
for
y'all
5
gonna have a problem.
Mr.
Order.
Chairman.
Chair.
Okay.
Order.
James Comer does not have control of that situation. It was instigated by Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene. We'll play the entire thing a little bit later here on the show. But thank you for being here. First, a note. I'm in Las Vegas. This is a pre-recorded show, so please comment. Mike and I will go back in after I get back into Phoenix today and say hi. So thank you for being here. And I think that this just really indicates that clip where we're at. I think that this, the internet age has brought this great unveiling of how things work. And we get to see how well they don't work more so because these videos that you just saw travel around quickly. But I want to bring something else up here because I think that this all ties together. So this is a story that I saw, I don't know, on some website that points out all the things we don't know about the universe. We've got tons of experts, and you can see right there, something is wrong with our model of the universe. Our picture of the cosmos is incredibly detailed, but it's incomplete. And I think that that's what I realized over the last couple of years is how fragile expertise really is. Like, we're human beings, we're very smart, but we're not as smart as, say, the universe. We're not as smart as, say, in understanding how everything works. I know we'd like to pretend because we as humans would like to control all the behaviors, but it's not. And if you look at who we vote for and who we send to Washington, ideally you'd want them to be experts in things, but clearly they're not. And because they're not experts in it, it's this grounding reality that we all live in that it's kind of up to you. And I think that's the greatest part about this because that's the elemental truth of freedom is that it is up to you. You get to make your own way and make your own rules, essentially, so long as you're not Scotty Scheffler driving to the PGA Championship. Scotty Scheffler, the golfer, is the best in the world. He's been on a hot streak. He got arrested at the PGA Championship. I don't know if you saw this story. There was a fatality. I don't mean to laugh at that. Outside of the entrance to the place where it's being played, Valhalla in Louisville. And there was cops directing traffic, and Scotty Scheffler didn't listen, went over a median, got arrested, being charged with a felony. That's the kind of stuff you want to avoid. But your path is yours. And the way information works and how it sticks in your brain, I always like to say that language is contagious. I'm going to give you a perfect example of how in the information age, where there's unlimited amounts of information, unlimited amounts of opinion, unlimited amounts of things that can influence your thinking, you don't really know what's true and what's not. So let's play this. Mike sent this to me because the Biden administration, let me pause it real quick. So this is a young woman. You'll understand where I'm going here with this video in just a second. But this is someone the Biden administration, the Biden team hired to go on to social media and pitch Joe Biden. Listen to
I started TikTok like the spring semester of my senior year, and I was like, fuck, I finally have to start applying for law school. And then
pardon the language, but I don't have FCC rules here on the internet.
Female privilege, life is so easy for a, woman. Obviously, I lucked out. I'm just kidding. I lucked out, and then, TikTok.
But see, this is the funny thing about this. I don't know how old this woman is. 20, 22. And she says female privilege. She's going to explain how she started making money on TikTok before she graduated high school.
It was basically full time for me. I think I was taking ads by the time I graduated college from like the Biden administration and Planned Parenthood and like dating apps and stuff. So it was like fully financially, sustaining.
So you were getting the Biden administration was buying ads from you?
Yeah, I was doing full on political propaganda.
And they would just
boom, hear that? Full on political propaganda.
Really, with like what kind of like Biden created 10 million jobs
Yeah,
this year.
honestly. And the funny thing is they're like, do not disclose this is an ad because, they're like, technically it's not a product. So you don't have to disclose it's an ad. Because I think they just wanted like some edgy girl of color to just tell people, like when they nominated like Ketanji Brown Jackson, they're like, can you say like as a person of color, that you feel reflected? And it's like a white woman emailing this to me. And she's like giving me this script. And I'm like, no.
And I'm going to stop it right there too, because how many times, if you listen to Russell and Hunter, do we bring this up? I call it this. White guilt is a massive economy. There are numerous books written about it, college courses, all trying to get people's money because it's all about the money. You can see it here. So here is a popular person on TikTok, a woman of color. The Biden administration needs to look a certain way because the younger you get, this woman's age, the more categorical you get in how you define yourself. I'm fortunate enough to have some friends that are around 30. She's obviously younger than that. But that is that age, around 30, where there's multiple criteria that you have to meet in order to be considered cool. But a lot of it is fake, as you can see right here.
He's like, please. And I'm like, no, I'll like talk about the news of it, but I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to have a white person tell me to be like, this is how I feel as a person of color. Like, it's just so, I think that black-pilled me slightly on like, political propaganda stuff.
So the Biden administration sees, here's this young,
yeah, I mean they use like a conduit. It's not like, you know what I mean? It's not Biden, but it's like a third party. You know what I mean? It's like a media company that's doing it on his.
Correct. Plausible deniability there, so it doesn't go all the way to the White House. It's just the team that the Biden White House hired to get the message out.
I'm not blaming him for this.
Yeah, and the message is like, because you're a dark-skinned woman, you will be inspired by Ketanji Brown Jackson and all the kids should support her.
Yeah, they're like, basically as like another black person, just say that like you feel reflected by Ketanji. I'm like, no, I'll talk about like Ketanji's background and her accomplishments, but like I never, you know what I mean? Like I'm not going to say like the corny stuff. Even if it was a brown person emailing it to me, I'm like, no, that's not like how I feel. Like I don't look at like Ketanji and feel like, wow.
Yeah. See,
So let's put this in perspective here. It's pretty obvious as to what's happening. Since language is contagious, there are powers that be, whether that's experts during the pandemic, whether that's politicians, and how they use the way you get information to try to influence your thinking. So what they're trying to do in this case with this young woman is take her popularity and try to get young people to go out to the polls. And they do it in the most obnoxious way. And this really gets down to this white guilt being a big economy. In that, when you think about Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, she's got all the qualifications that led her to the Supreme Court. Harvard educated, she's been a judge for a long time. But they lead with what's obvious, the color of her skin, because they're trying to placate a young audience they don't relate to. So what they're trying to do as old, established, powerful people is make it look like young people are down with Joe Biden. But I read a poll this morning that's super interesting. 14% of people who voted for Joe Biden won't vote for him again. Some of them do admit that Biden could convince them later on in the voting process that they will. But this is what the Biden administration is aware of. They see the polls, that's what they're trying to do. But it's all propaganda in that sense that you don't know what's coming at you is real because there's so much information. So it used to be back in the day, we could even go back to the 3 television station example. We had 3 news choices to pick from. Then information was all controlled by people like Walter Cronkite and news directors. They determined what they thought was the news and what was most important, and they shared it with you. And then cable news comes around, and then news isn't just a couple hours a night or half-hour national news. It's all day. So now you need more information. And I came into the talk radio business right around the time where cable news was starting to get big. I think Fox News started in 96. CNN's been on for a long time, but it was mostly just news, right? On repeat. Fox News comes in, starts adding more opinion. And then now you have CNN, you have Fox, then you have MSNBC, and you have the internet. So now there's no filters. Like the New York Times, same example. Washington Post, the Arizona Republic. It used to be that news directors would determine, they would look there and they would say, okay, this is the news. I want you to go cover that. We're going to take this story. We're going to put it on the front page. The New York Times used to run with all the news that's fit to print. But see, it turns out that not many people read all the news. So the news became a self-fulfilling, important, well, they felt that they were very important. And now that that bubble is burst, it's like chaos everywhere. So politicians in particular, who used to be able to use the news and create narratives around the news, because it was that we used to believe the government when they told us the truth, right? Or at least we just suspected that. Well, now it delves into these political fights because it's no holds barred. Children are running the asylum. I'm going to go back to this Marjorie Taylor Greene because this is exactly what's happening in Washington. I got to figure out which video is right. Here we go. It's 3 minutes long. Let's hang in there and watch this here. Here we go. And I'll pause it there just for a second because Judge Marchand is the judge in the Trump case that's going on in New York right now. There are all kinds of things about the judge's daughter, that she is a big-time Democrat, that she supported Obama, and posted pictures online of Trump in jail. There is some questions about whether or not those pictures of Trump in jail are real, because here's what's interesting. This judge's daughter took her X account, Twitter account, private right around the time the trial was starting to get going or right before it or whatever. Then all of a sudden, a new account popped up in public that showed Judge Marchand's daughter supposedly posting that picture of Trump in jail. This ties into the same point. Just because it comes from your side doesn't mean it's true. Just because it comes from your side, Marjorie Taylor Greene in this case, doesn't mean it's accurate. Doesn't mean it's not propaganda, because at the essence of all communication is propaganda. Governments try to tell you the truth, shape the narrative so that you believe it, so that you believe that the government, the politicians are trustworthy, or say big science, as we learned during COVID. They're trustworthy. They know what they're doing. They're absolutely telling you the truth. Why would they lie to you? But that bubble is burst, and that's what's descended into this here with Marjorie Taylor Greene introducing this idea that wanting to know if any other Democrats on this committee have hired Judge Marchand's daughter. An interesting question, but this is where it goes.
Please tell me what that has to do with Merrick Garland.
Is she a porn star?
Oh, Goldman.
Did you hear that? Is she a porn star?
That's right.
No, the Biden administration is too busy hiring those to tell you what's right about the Biden administration.
He's advising. Okay.
He's advising who? What?
Again, this is a House hearing.
Do you know what we're here for? You know we're here about AG.
I don't think you know what you're here for.
Well, you the one talking about.
I think your fake eyelashes are messing up.
No, ain't nothing.
Hold on.
Listen.
Order.
So here we go, right? We're already getting into the eyelashes, and that, not the favorite part, according to, well, the other side.
Mr. Chairman,
That's beneath even
please
order.
regain order of your committee.
Order.
I do have a point of order, and I would like to move to take down Ms. Greene's words.
It's AOC.
That is absolutely unacceptable. How dare you
Meeting will
attack the
suspend.
physical...
I love the fake outrage. This is hilarious because these are made for TV moments. Made for internet moments is even better, because really that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants these moments that will go viral on Twitter and go viral on Instagram and be seen by millions of people, or at least we think they're seen by millions of people, because that too, views, likes, it's all propaganda, because nobody really watches anything. And that was something that was discovered by the news media, is that I was just reading this book by guys that run Axios, which is a news site. And the way that they streamline the news is very important, because they did a bunch of research and they realized that none of us really read full articles. Very few of us will sit down with the New York Times and go through an 8-minute article. Most of us will read the headline, maybe the first paragraph, maybe the second paragraph, and it just goes down from there. So this viral world, this quick world, is made for moments like this, which is why they happen. And then, of course, there's the fake self-righteousness out there in Washington from people like AOC. Like, how dare you talk about someone's physical appearance? Okay.
appearance of another person.
Are your
Move
feelings hurt?
her words down.
Aw.
Oh, girl, baby girl.
Oh, really?
Don't even play.
Baby girl, I don't think
we are going to
so.
move, and we're going to take your words down.
I
Thank you very
second that motion.
There she is.
So who will have to pay?
And again, take your words down. This is only something that Congress talks about. Take your words down. I heard the words. We get to take them out of the quote-unquote official record. They still happened, and the official record is now on Twitter.
Ms. Green agrees to strike her words.
I believe she
Chair
needs to apologize.
recognizes
No,
Mr.
no. She
Perry.
needs to
Okay,
apologize.
hold on. Then after Mr. Perry's going to be recognized, then Ms. Green
I'm not
has 4 minutes and
apologizing.
21
Well,
seconds.
then
Okay,
you're not
reserve the right to
striking your
object.
words.
I am
Mr.
not
Chair,
apologizing.
Now let's go. Come on, guys.
Why don't you debate me?
Mr. Chairman, the
it's
minority.
pretty
No,
self-evident.
Chair you're not.
Yeah, you're
out
not.
of order.
You don't have enough
You're out of order.
intelligence.
Chair recognizes Mr. Perry.
Okay, move to strike
I'd
the.
like to
I
strike
move to
those
strike the
words
lady's
as well.
I move to
I would
strike-
like to
Order.
strike
the
those
lady's
as well.
words again.
That's 2 requests to strike. That's 2 requests to strike.
Oh, they cannot take the
There's
words.
another motion to strike her words again. Please
All right.
get
Okay.
your members under
Here's
control.
the correct parliamentary.
There's Comey. Not sure what to do. Poor Comey.
Ms. Green, do you agree to unanimous consent to strike your words?
I repeat again for the second time. Yes, I'll strike
right.
my words,
That-
but I'm not
all right.
apologizing.
Without objection. Without
Not
objection.
apologizing.
21 seconds.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
It gets even better here. But I mean, I think if you sum all of this up with a little bit left here to play for you, going back to what we think of experts and how that bubble has been burst, that we know a lot as humans, but we also don't know a lot as humans, more than we know. And I think it's important to keep that perspective, because if we're relying on people like this in this congressional hearing to solve our nation's problems and they act like this, they ain't going to solve our nation's problems. And all that happens is our nation's problems get bigger and bigger and bigger. There's been a lot about Brown versus Board of Education. I think it's the 80th anniversary of that court decision that ended segregation in schools. I just saw a stat this morning I was sharing with Mrs. H. 86% of Americans at this point support Brown versus the Board of Education. What? 70 years ago. But see, here's the thing. Talk about Brown versus Board of Education you want. Over the last 80 years, guess what's happened? Schools are more segregated now than they were 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. So these people that are in these hearings, that make these policies, that talk all this good game, don't get any results. So if Brown versus the Board of Education, as we celebrate, we did it in school back in my day. Oh, it's a great decision for America because it put us on that right path to all men and women are created equal. But beneath the curtain, it's still the same. Beneath the curtain, it's actually worse because we have people like this in Congress.
Who's
It's me.
Ms. Crockett?
I'm just curious, just to better understand your ruling. If someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
Okay, which is also interesting that you see that because they were just complaining. AOC was just complaining. You can't talk about another member like that. Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene was just talked about like that. So it's all bizarre and fake.
What now?
Chairman, I make a motion to strike those words.
I don't think that's
Hold on.
part
I'm
of the.
trying to find clarification on what quality.
Chairman,
I didn't-
motion to
I
strike
have no
those
idea
words.
what you just said.
We're not gonna do this. Look, you guys earlier literally just said
You
that.
just voted to do
Y'all did
it.
it first, so you don't
just
talk
voted to do it.
Literally children. I think we get the point there. And it's having this perspective for me that has helped me understand my role in all of this. As in, I don't really have one. I vote. That's it. I had this realization being a Patriots fan. Growing up in New England, you watch your Patriots. You watched them when they were 2-14, and they were terrible. But then they start winning. And they win a couple Super Bowls, and then they go to the Super Bowl in 2007 to 2008, technically. And they were undefeated, and they lose. And I had so much emotional equity in that team that I was devastated. And lo and behold, the older I got, the further away I got from that loss, I realized how much emotional equity I put in something I couldn't control. And when they lost, I woke up early before the alarm, staring at the ceiling. It was as if I was mourning something. And it was a good perspective shift for me because I was mourning a football game, number one. and like I just mentioned, that I couldn't control. Politics is very much the same. We fight about it, we yell about it, we scream about it, yet we keep doing the same thing. It's like the Brown versus Board of Education. It's almost as if we talk ourselves into circles and we just keep doing the same thing. And my man Mike Russell always says, do what you always do, get what you always got. And that's American politics. Do what you always do, get what you always got. Because we love to do lip service. We love to pay attention to rousing speeches, and I love them too. Watch JFK, watch Reagan. And they move you, and they make you believe that this country that we live in is the greatest because you have the option to pursue your own path. And that's the best part about it, in my opinion, is that whatever these children are doing in Washington, D.C., it doesn't impact you. And if it does, it's time to maybe reassess and say, am I giving too much of myself to people who act like this, picking sides, wanting your side to win, the other side to lose, wanting to call the other side names? Because that's not how results get done. And all I care about in this country is forward progress, economic progress, more prosperity across the board. And how do you do that? Not by yelling at each other and undermining each other, which brings up something else, something unrelated to politics, but related to the entire debate, and Ellen DeGeneres. Little backstory on Ellen. Ellen was canceled, essentially, because she apparently wasn't as nice as she seems while she was running a TV show. Well, she's coming back and she's doing a stand-up tour. And in it, she starts to talk about getting canceled and pointing out the ludicrousness of all of it. So here's Ellen. It's not Ellen, but it's a voiceover. Let me restart this for you here. So this is also you're gonna hear this voiceover and you're gonna understand what's happened to media too.
Ellen DeGeneres is reflecting on the end of her talk show and the workplace controversy that came before it. The comedian addressed the situation with humor during the first night of her new stand-up tour in Los Angeles on Wednesday, according to Rolling Stone, saying to the crowd per the outlet, "What else can I tell you? Oh yeah, I got kicked out of show business. There's no mean people in show business."
And this is a product of all of this information that we have. And we find out one bad thing about someone, we're like, oh my goodness. We don't even know if it's true that Ellen yelled at her staff, that maybe Ellen had high standards and maybe the staff wasn't meeting the high standards. And what's so ironic about canceling Ellen and all those complaints about how tough she was to work with, guess what? When you fire Ellen, none of those people have jobs anymore. So now what? You're on to the next thing. So the gig that you had because you complain, you no longer have. Instead of trying to work it out internally, figuring out a path forward, no. There's more advantages in going to anonymous sources or posting something on Twitter, hoping that the world cares about it. And then the world cares about it for about 7 minutes, and then we move on. So much so that I forgot Ellen was canceled until this video came out, until she came back out and points out, yeah, I'm the only mean person in show business.
She continued, "The be kind girl wasn't kind. I became this one-dimensional character who gave stuff away and danced up steps. Do you know how hard it is to dance up steps? Would a mean person dance up steps?"
That's classic Ellen DeGeneres humor right there. And maybe Ellen's not your bag. That's okay. But what happened to her is ridiculous. And it's a lesson to be learned for all of us, going back to that emotional equity we put into these stories. Like, well, Ellen's a liberal, so Ellen's mean, therefore Ellen should be canceled because people on my side got canceled for being mean. Meanwhile, we don't know the truth. All we know is people are complaining. Because this is what I know about myself. When I complain, I'm really complaining about me deep down, somewhere in there. So I'm trying to work on complaining less than I do now, especially about things I cannot control. I don't always succeed. I still do it. I probably always will do it, but I'm going to be trying to work on it because I realize my lack of knowledge. I know a lot of things, but I also don't know a lot of things. And I don't know much about this Ellen story other than what I'm being told. And just like the children in Congress, when we were kids, you ever play the game of telephone where you line everybody up and you start on one end and tell a story, the first person, second person, and let's say there's 100 kids or 30 kids. How much that story changes? That's true. even in news, because it's subject to people's interpretations. And we don't know what that person's going through, what their emotional state is. We don't know what their background is and why they're trying to shape this story. Because we certainly live in an attention economy, because people's attention spans are dropping. We're understanding that nobody reads as much as we thought when it comes to news. Nobody watches long videos, or very few people do. I mean, even on YouTube, you can go on YouTube, you can scroll across and see where, there's like hills where people watch the videos. They scan through it and scroll through it. Nobody sits through whole things anymore. And that's okay, because that's part of human nature. But we're overreacting to things we know nothing about as a society, and that's creating this emotional instability all the way to Congress.
Ellen also quipped in her set that she, quote, didn't know how to be a boss. She joked, I didn't go to business school. I went to Charlie's Chuckle Hut. The show was called Ellen, and everybody was wearing t-shirts that said Ellen. And there were buildings on the Warner Brothers lot that said Ellen. But I don't know that meant I should be in charge.
Maybe that's just a big part of it right there. That's that self-realization that, I'm the face of this. I'm really good at performing. I'm really good at coming up with jokes. I'm really good at connecting with my audience, but I'm not really great at running the show. But the problem is, when it is your brand and your show, you got to do all those things. And doing all those things is not easy. I mean, I just stepped into an entrepreneurial space. I've been in this space for about 7 months. Man, it's a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. You got to do a lot of things, and I should have learned from watching Lady Bromance, Mrs. H, and all the things that she has to do. But it's not as if everything just lines up perfectly and everything is great. Sometimes you got to make tough calls. Sometimes you got to have tough conversations. That's all part of running the show. And it's so interesting that we always talk about forgiveness as part of our humanity, but we don't seem to practice it a lot. We don't seem to go towards understanding or asking more questions. It's just, we love to see people canceled. It's just one of those human nature things. But we also love a good comeback, which is why Ellen hung back, took a couple of years off, and is making her comeback.
Situation was a, quote, toll on my ego and my self-esteem. Saying, there's such extremes in this business. People either love you and idolize you, or they hate you. And those people somehow are louder.
And that's always the case, isn't it? Look around. Look at what we just watched. If you caught Marjorie Taylor Greene taking on all the Democrats, and the Democrats taking on Marjorie Taylor Greene, resorting in these childish bickering contests that entertain us when we're watching it on X. But for me, it's just more disappointment. But that more disappointment is just an understanding of reality, that Marjorie Taylor Greene and AOC and Comey, they're not fixing problems. They're creating more problems. So the problems, they're going to be solved. They're going to be solved by you. Maybe by me. Because it's very clear, based on the Brown versus Board of Education, that schools are more segregated than they've been in a long time. That just because a court makes a decision doesn't mean every problem goes away. Because problems are solved collectively. Problems are solved when you work together. You collaborate. Same in any business. Same in any government. Because that's just the reality of it. People disagree. So how do you solve problems when you disagree? You go forward and you don't call each other names, because then you never solve problems, because you don't like each other. Then you can't even communicate.
Ellen also reportedly held a conversation with the audience after the show, where she answered questions about the situation, saying at one point, per Rolling Stone, it was so hurtful. I couldn't gain perspective. I couldn't do anything to make myself understand that it wasn't personal. I just thought, well, this is not the way I wanted to end my career, but this is the way it's ending.
And that's show business in a nutshell. Popular a minute, next minute you're not. And it's strange that just to be able to wipe an entire television series that's been on for 19 years because someone's mean for 5 minutes.
She added.
But that's that overreactive emotional society we've created with all this information, because we have all these free dopamine hits and free emotional hits anytime we want them.
Honestly, I'm making jokes about what happened to me, but it was devastating, really. I just hated the way the show ended. I love that show so much, and I just hated that the last time people would see me is that way. Ellen's comedy return comes more than 3 years after more than 30 employees at the Ellen Degeneres show came forward with claims of a toxic work environment. Ellen later addressed the allegations on air, saying that after an investigation, I learned things happened there that never should have happened. I take that very seriously, and I want to say I'm so sorry to the people who were affected. I know that I'm in a position of privilege and power, and I realize that with that comes responsibility, and I take responsibility for what happens at my show.
But see, that is also very interesting if you note that. Words become overused quite a bit quickly in this information connectivity age. Toxic workplace. How many times have you heard that? A lot. You could probably even fit the definition to your workplace if you have a job in a corporate setting. You could probably find things that don't go well because anytime you have a big organization, things aren't perfect. Anytime you have people going people, it can create difficult situations. And what is the definition of toxic? Honestly, I don't know, because I've heard so many different stories about toxic environments. I've certainly worked in places where a culture was okay, culture was good, culture was Would I call them toxic? Maybe certain instances were toxic, but most of the experience that I had, at least in a couple places, was you're on your own because no one's actually going to coach you to be better. No one's going to give you good feedback that you can use to be better at your job, be better at life, be a better person, because that just doesn't seem to happen. So what I found is that it's up to me. So if I don't like a situation, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to go to Twitter and complain and end up losing my job because now the toxic workplace is no longer a workplace? So now you have to go through and find another job, which you could have done anyways, because you're taking your fate into your own hands. And that's what I wish I knew back at the age of 28 or 30. I wish I understood it more, that I can complain all I want or I can take action. Because what happens when a culture, a country, gets so caught up in surfing through all these words like toxic workplace, or who knows what other words that are overused. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but you get situations like this.
Ellen announced the following spring that the show would be coming to an end. At the time, she told The Hollywood Reporter that while the allegations, quote, almost impacted the show, it wasn't the reason she was stopping the series, saying her decision to say goodbye had been in the works for some time.
But she's right at the end of it, right? And how I try to look at things now is in lessons to be learned. Because if you look at Brown versus the Board of Education, if you look at the rise of anti-Semitism, you understand that human nature is very cyclical. And it's cyclical unless we do something about it and we educate each other and ourselves about why we repeat these patterns over and over and over again. And it all comes down to us as individuals and what we react to and what we repost and what we talk about with friends and who we vote for and what we buy, because all of those are our individual choices that we get to make. And if we're celebrating the demise of people, maybe we're doing it wrong. Maybe instead of watching these Marjorie Taylor Greene fight with the Democrats, maybe, just maybe, we can start thinking about it a different way. But it requires effort. It requires changing. All of those things are difficult. But that's a part of how we progress, a part of how you don't look at Brown versus the Board of Education and go, yeah, man, we did it. The court saved the day. No, the court didn't save the day because we're still segregated. And what's interesting about politics is how we reward people for not solving problems, how we reward people. So let's put it this way. When you have an education system, the Supreme Court, 1954, says you can't segregate people based on race. You would think that that would be a call to people that work in the education department. So the White House runs that, right? Department of Education could go in and put some policies in place to actually help people get out of situations, because education is always the key. It's the most important part, which is why Thomas Jefferson was a huge proponent of a public education system, because a public education system, you uplift everybody, give people knowledge. But the question has become, at least in my opinion, this broad range of knowledge that we share with students, mostly around the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, which is so funny that that's actually an education thing. The 3 R's. What about skills? What about learning how your brain works, how your mind plays tricks on you, how your internal communication system guides your decisions, your belief system guides your decisions. Helping people with that, because that's the most important life skill, as we're just talking about here. Because if we educated each other on that, to understand how our emotions work and how our emotions impact us, the emotions impact what we say, our emotions impact what we do. If we can understand how that works and educate each other on that, we will have less of these political fights in these House hearings that you saw. And then I'll play again for you just for fun here. Let's do this. Let's do this. Oh my goodness. You get it. You get it. I think I get it. I think that's enough. I think that's quite a bit. Because all of this comes up as there are many things to ponder. Many things to ponder as to what is right and what is wrong. Here's another example. So this is not a political example, but over in the Netherlands, they have approved euthanasia. So when you think about, when I do anyways, I think about someone who has cancer or someone that has a condition that is going to slowly deteriorate them, and they're deciding, no, you know what? I don't want to go through that. I want to basically be put to sleep. And I think you can make a compelling case for that. Because if you've seen people suffer through awful cancer or awful sickness, I think you can make the case that in some ways, based on individual choice, you should have the right, the freedom to decide that, especially because some of the hospital treatments are tough. They're expensive. There's all kinds of things that go into it. But if you look at this story right here, this is a little bit different. So here's a 29-year-old woman in the Netherlands, Zoraya, who has been given an okay to be put to sleep, essentially, because of mental suffering. Now, again, there's a freedom component here that you can make the case that, sure, she should be allowed to do this because she could do it if she wanted to. But is this a step too far? And again, we're pre-recorded today just because of travel schedules, and Mike is off today. So please comment on this story because I would love to know where you're at on it. Morally, freedom, because those are the big questions here. So part of me says, yeah, okay, it's her choice. She's 29 years old. If she wants to be put to sleep, she can be put to sleep. Because it says right there in the headline, you can see chronic depression, anxiety, and trauma in unspecified personality disorder. And this has actually become one of the areas that is very much overused, the language. Because there is severe mental illness. There's real mental illness. There's depression. There's anxiety. And their impacts are definitely real. But to go back to the categorization of younger people, that's part of their categories, their conditions. It's not just their race. It's not just who they prefer sexually or dating-wise. It is their neurodivergent status. And now there's a wide open range of things in which you can self-identify. And when you self-identify and you really believe it, it's very hard to shake that belief. Because there's the part that is real, and then there's the part that the language is used. And as I like to say, language is contagious. What's said and what you listen to is what sticks in your brain. And if you're surrounding yourself by language that tries to convince you that you suffer from chronic depression and you can never get better, you might end up like this 29-year-old Dutch woman. You might be in that situation where you're like, I don't want to do it anymore. But there are alternatives. There are things that you could try, do, certain tools that you can learn to change your mind. But when you're assaulted by this language all the time about how awful life is and how terrible you are, or how the term maybe depression is yours, it's your label, which is a funny label because my friend Adam, he's our head coach at Earn It All. It's a company that I am a minority owner in. We do fitness and nutrition programming, but our head coach, Adam Nail, he said something that caught my eye, our ear. He said, and talking about addicts, he's like, if you were an addict, say you're an alcoholic, and you haven't had a drink in 30 years, you're no longer an alcoholic. And I was like, wait a second. Because not many people say that you can let go of that label if you haven't done it for a long time. And maybe sometimes you need that reminder, right? I saw, for example, Eminem, the rapper, posted a sobriety coin a couple of months ago. And I forget, it was, I don't know how many years it was. If you need that reminder, that's cool. But that word is heavy. A word like depression is heavy. And I can relate to that too, because I was diagnosed twice. And it was something I thought I would have to carry around with me forever. But I decided after hearing that, I'm like, I don't have to label myself that way anymore. And in not labeling myself that way, I took that word out of my internal communication, and lo and behold, wasn't there anymore. I'm like, huh. Because that's another thing that I've learned is the power of this thing that's in my head and the power of the language that I say to myself and the impacts that it has on me, and it has the impacts that it has on others. I can be in control of that. So to go back to this story, I'll put the headline up here again here so you can see it. 29-year-old Dutch woman approved through euthanasia. I'm, as much as I love freedom, and I know that she has other options, and this is probably the most humane one, if you want to call it that. I don't think that condition has to be forever for everybody. Yet we're under this impression that once you're diagnosed or labeled something, that's it for you forever. So that's something to ponder, something to think about. And I would love to know what you think about that. So please comment. And as I said, we're pre-recorded today, but Mike and I will go back in and see what you guys say, because these are the dilemmas that I think we can talk about and try to come up with solutions for and try to figure out what's right, but trying not to judge as well. That's the hardest part, because who am I to take away her right to be able to make that decision, even if I disagree with it? But it's just interesting that there's now, at least in the Netherlands, a legal path to suicide, essentially. So on a completely unrelated note, something else to ponder. Robots are here. I'm in Vegas and was in Mrs. H. Do you remember which hotel we were in when we got the robot drinks? Planet Hollywood. We're in the Planet Hollywood. And the ladies were shopping, and Dad Yak and I doing a little walking around, and there's this thing called the Tipsy Robot. And I'm like, what is this? And there's a bar right up front. There's a bartender. And I'm like, why is it called Tipsy Robot? Well, if you go past the bar, you realize there's two robots that make drinks. And I sent this to Mike, and I'll share this with you. A robot. Let me rewind it. Here we go. Made by a robot. That robot behind me. You'll appreciate the name of it at least. It's called the COVID Killer. So let's try it out. I don't remember what's in it. It's vodka, it's some stuff, blue curacao, that's where the color comes from. But the robot does the whole thing. All you gotta do is press a button, and that's a damn good cocktail. So, cheers. Robots are here. Yeah, that robot made my drink, and it was pretty tasty. Mrs. H, how was yours? Very good, says Mrs. H. Robots are here, and there's nothing we can do about it. So I want to I want to pull up Mike's response real quick. Give me a second here, because I cannot actually tell you what Mike said, but it involved a couple of four-letter words. Although he said, we were trying to figure out when we could record and do this. He says, can you still do it this evening, or has Skynet get you wasted? Because that's Mike's big fear, is that the robots are going to take over, and that AI combined with robots like Terminator going to spell the end of humanity. But it's already here. AI is here. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tubes. We got to figure out how to navigate through these things, which gets back to the moral quandary we find ourselves in. Because there's always human beings who want to cut corners. There's always human beings who want to cheat. There's always human beings who want to control other human beings as a dictator or a totalitarian. So their morals, if you support totalitarianism, are different than maybe your morals. How do you get the right moral philosophy behind the AI, behind the robots, so that they just act as robots? They just make us drinks. Another interesting side note about robots here is I just watched this video. I should have pulled it. I didn't think about it till just now, of a Chinese electric car manufacturer. Their entire factory is robots. So they had this, robot drone fly through, and it showed you the process of putting the car together. And it was a truck that I was looking at, and I can't remember the name of the company offhand. But I also found out that Biden has put 100% tariff on these Chinese electric vehicles. Isn't that interesting? So here's how I interpret this. The Chinese have a very similar problem that we have, a demographic problem, as in their country's old, our country's old. I forget the number of people that turn 65 every day. It's like, I don't know, it's a lot. And as our country's old, we're not replacing the population because our birth rates are down, so we have to adapt because we still need productivity. And if we don't have enough people, we need machines to do it. So China, or at least a company, government, whatever, came up with this concept, built a robotic factory to build these cars. And what you don't have is labor. You have robots that you've purchased, robots that you'll fix and maintain, but you don't have people. And without people, you don't have health insurance costs. In our case, you don't have to pay the FICA taxes because hiring an employee in a corporation in this country is expensive because you as the company have to pay a certain percentage of the FICA taxes. The employee pays the other half. So your hiring cost, especially if you're paying health insurance, is high. So a $50,000 salary, you're probably $75,000, $100,000 employee as far as costs go. Well, imagine now you take that big labor expense out of building a car. The car is cheap. At one point, General Motors, because of retirees and pensions and health care that they gave their retirees, $1,200 of a GM car specifically paid for retirees. So now what the Biden administration is doing is putting 100% tariff on this Chinese electric vehicle because it's cheaper. And because Joe Biden is pro-union, he wants all those union car makers to make cars because those are good jobs, economic movement, and of course, union donations to Democrats. So you see how this works. And I get it that China has figured out the game and figured out that this is what they need to do to grow, to come back to the robots here in Vegas making a drink. Now, if you're that bar, the Tipsy Robot, you don't need as many employees. Your overhead costs are lower. And certain fast food restaurants are not adopting robots, although some are, because what's it called? Flippy. There's a machine, a robot called Flippy that you can put in fast food restaurants, flip burgers, do fries. They're inventing all this new technology to get all these things to do them like clockwork. And without that expense, boom, costs are lower. So imagine that you could, I don't know what these Chinese electric vehicles are going to cost, but let's just put it at $20,000. $20,000 is, there's not many cars you can get for $20,000. But imagine if you're GM, or imagine if you're Ford, imagine if you are a big car manufacturer and you didn't have as many employees because you had robots making cars. What would happen to the price of the car? It would go down because the biggest expense of all is always labor. So these innovations are coming whether we like it or not. Whether it's the robots making a drink here in Vegas, whether it's a robot serving you a burger at a fast food restaurant, whether it is a robot making a car in China. I went into the BMW factory, at least one of them, in Regensburg, Germany several years ago, and it was some robotics, some people. It was a hybrid mix of both. So as we grow and as we continue to evolve and as we continue to age as a society, we're going to see more of this, especially if minimum wages keep creeping up. So what's going to happen now? Well, the good question is going to be how many of these jobs are going to be replaced? A couple of different factors here. Teenagers, not necessarily at a bar, but a fast food restaurant or a supermarket, those are good entry-level jobs for teenagers to have. I did it at a supermarket. In fact, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, my first job. And that first job gives you that first taste of real-world experience, how a company works, how to work your way up, how to give good customer service. You have all these things that you learn. But now with a $20 minimum wage in some places, California, in Arizona, we're indexed to inflation, so it's $15 an hour. Again, you got your FICA tax, you got your health insurance if you're offering that to people. So that $15 an hour is like $30 an hour. So $30 an hour to do a basic job that doesn't have a lot of economic output tied to it, well, what goes away? That job. So now you're taking away opportunities for teenagers to get into the workforce and learn some skills, or you're taking away the jobs of people that we would call poor. Maybe they're high school graduates. Maybe they didn't get that far. Maybe they have a GED. It's hard to get gigs if you're in that position. In fact, I was talking to a kid just recently, 17 years old. He was starting to get into sales, and he had just closed his first sale, and it was a pretty big sale. And he was contemplating just leaving school to go full-time into the sales. And I said, kid, and this was in March, I'm like, you got like 2 months left. Just go get the diploma, put it in a drawer somewhere. It'll come in handy. Maybe it won't, but at least you have it. And it was weird to be in that position to talk to a 17-year-old kid who's already selling things. It was like a wholesale property too. So it was a big sale. But it's going to be kids like that in that position that are going to have to go into sales, have to be good at sales, because that's not many options for them because they've been replaced by robots. That's the challenge here going forward is if the wages continue to go up, the costs continue to go up, it becomes harder to afford a basic standard of living. Harder it is to afford a basic standard of living, the more desperate we get, the more we sound like politics in Washington, D.C. So you see how this all ties together. So whether you like the robots or not, they're here, they're necessary, and money always wins. As we like to say here at Russell and Hunter's The Brewmance, it's all about the money. Robots, drinks, electric cars. And you have to remember about China and the electric cars. They control most of the world's flow of materials needed to make these electronic components. Also why they can create cars that are cheaper. And also putting America at a disadvantage because the Biden administration says, maybe you don't want to buy a Chinese car. Maybe you do. But now, if you do, you're going to pay twice what it's worth so that American car companies can keep up. Protectionism never works. I don't like it. Look at the history of it. But as we discussed today, until we change, until we stop getting protective, until we get competitive in a good way, willing to face the challenges, we're going to continue to see political fights just like this.
I'm trying to get clarification.
Look at, calm down. Calm down.
That's what America needs to do. Calm down. But as I've learned, never tell someone who's agitated to calm down. We got to get out of here. Thank you so much for being here. Sorry we were pre-recorded today. Mike and I will be back live Monday at 4. We do it twice a week for you. We're going to expand that in about a month or so. So we'll have more details for you coming up as Mike and I are working through all of this. But we know that you're being underserved by the media. So we're here to try to give us a more holistic approach based on that concept of freedom. For Mike Russell, I'm Rob Hunter. We are Russell and Hunter's The Brewmance. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll read your comments soon. Cheers.